Will they be hearing what we are saying now?
Yes, we're live now.
I saw the PGA.
You see him? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
He's there.
Yeah.
We just need to make him a panelist, colleagues. And I'll check for the other ambassadors as well.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Just in time. Oh my gosh, okay.
Thank
you. You can hear me, Ignacio?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry about the technical difficulties there.
No worries.
All's well that ends well.
Welcome, Jay. Welcome.
Glad to be here.
All right. So Ignace, will you give me the sign when to start?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Welcome for today's session. We will start in 1 or 2 minutes. We are just finalizing some technical connection for the speakers. Thank you.
Ignace, I think I see Ambassador Duarte Lopes. Yeah, good morning, bom dia. Perhaps we can test your audio as well.
Okay, bom dia, good morning. Are you listening?
Yes, bom dia, Ambassador. We hear you very well and the camera is good.
Thank you.
I'm following up with the colleagues at the Mission of Kenya. Okay, and I'll be checking also on the participants list.
PJ is coming shortly.
And Kenya is around. Good morning.
Good morning, Ambassador.
Good morning, Excellency. Good morning.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. So I think we'll be ready to start whenever our PGA is back.
Yeah, PJ will be coming now. And please, can we please change the name of His Excellency? He says speaker link for Ambassador of Kenya. If you can change the name.
I didn't know I didn't have a new name.
Yes. Yeah, PJ is here now. So PJ is here now.
Okay.
So yeah.
So we can start Sturla.
Okay.
Maybe we can just test the mic for the PGA. Good morning, he's on the phone.
You're testing our mics or everyone's mics?
No, that's good. We are just waiting for His Excellency, President of the General Assembly, to test his microphone.
He's on the phone with Joby.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep,
can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah, so, okay.
All right, we're ready to start.
So Sturla, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Ignace. Excellencies, dear friends, very good morning, afternoon, and evening to you all. I hope you are well and safe in these strange and indeed challenging times. Thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome to this webinar co-hosted by UNDESA and the UN Global Compact. My name is Sturla Henriksen. I'm Special Advisor Ocean for the UN Global Compact, and I will be moderating the first part of the session. In light of the COVID-19 pandemic, the 2020 United Nations Oceans Conference has been postponed. That, however, does not mean that we have leveled down or postponed our important work. If anything, the pace and ambitions are higher than ever. This session is part of a series of webinars organized by UNDESA to keep the momentum for ocean action towards the UN Ocean Conference. And today's session will focus on the role of the private sector. And we are joined by participants from 60 different countries around the globe. To start this session, it's my true honor to invite His Excellency Tijani Mohammad Bande, President of the 74th session of the General Assembly, to take the floor. Please, Your Excellency.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I thank the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, DESA, UN Global Compact, and the United Nations Non-Governmental Liaison Service for convening today's online discussion on the critical issue of ocean action. At the outset, I extend my condolences to those who have lost loved ones to COVID-19. I wish those suffering from the effects of the virus a full recovery. I thank all healthcare and frontline workers, as well as private sector partners, for their tireless work. In 2015, we recognized the indivisible link between life on land and life underwater, and promised to take action in order to build a better world for all. We cannot renege on that pledge, especially in this time of crisis. In addressing COVID-19 pandemic, we must not relent upon our efforts for ocean action. As economies and societies suffer, we must turn to innovative methods to build back better. In both our rapid response to COVID-19 and our long-term planning, we must address the root causes of systemic shocks, which increase the risk of disease emergence and spread among people, animals, and other living species. We must take urgent action to combat the acidification and pollution of oceans, biodiversity loss on land and underwater, deforestation, and ecosystem change, which contribute to climate change. Furthermore, sea levels are rising, and small island developing states are facing the existential threat of being submerged. We must act now to prevent the displacement of millions of people living in coastal areas. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, ocean action has the capacity to assist global recovery efforts in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic. The United Nations Commission on Trade and Development estimates that global trade may fall by a record 27% in 2020 due to the pandemic, as almost 90% goods travel by sea. The private sector has a unique role to play in our recovery, with its ability to generate 100 million jobs around the world by 2050 by investing in green and blue economies. This would increase global GDP by 2.4%, amounting to a cumulative gain of 98 trillion by 2050. The worldwide ocean economy is valued at 1.5 trillion annually. Indeed, aquaculture is the fastest growing food sector. 300 million jobs worldwide are linked to fisheries, which approximately 3 billion people relying on seafood as their primary source of protein. We need to build a sustainable blue economy, which is based upon traceable and sustainable seafood, zero emissions, ocean transport and supply chains, scaling up renewable ocean-based energy, ocean mapping, and ending plastic pollution in our oceans. This will require a comprehensive approach which aligns all incentives and subsidies in pursuit of a just transition towards the green and blue economies. In light of the COVID-19 pandemic, the 2020 United Nations Oceans Conference has been postponed. However, we'll continue to mobilize and engage stakeholders in the substantive preparations for the conference. I call on governments, the private sector, and civil society to recommit to the Paris Climate Agreement, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and the Addis Ababa Action Agenda. We have a shared responsibility to humanity to take urgent action to ensure a healthy ocean. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Now I would like to invite Ms. Lotta Tatinen Chief of the Outreach and Partnerships Branch of the Division for Sustainable Development Goals at UNDESA, to take the floor, please.
Thank you, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to colleagues who are joining this webinar on behalf of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, who is the Secretariat for the 2020 Ocean Conference. Allow me also to warmly welcome you all to this webinar on Keeping the Momentum for Ocean Action series, with a particular focus on private sector participation and engagement. As has been mentioned by some of the preceding colleagues, despite the fact that the Ocean Conference that was supposed to be held in June 2020 has been postponed because of the ongoing COVID-19 crisis, we are delighted that the preparatory process is continuing strongly under the leadership of the two co-hosts, Kenya and Portugal. And we are delighted to have both represented with us here today. To keep the momentum going around the 2020 Ocean Conference, the UNDESA has been promoting a series of activities amongst all stakeholders, including online consultations and open webinars, to bring additional perspectives from stakeholders from around the world, from different sectors and regions. Today's webinar is the second in a series of Keeping the Momentum webinars, and the particular focus of today's discussion is, of course, to hear from the private sector colleagues on how to keep the momentum amongst your sector around the Ocean Conference. I want to acknowledge in particular the United Nations Global Compact for your support and partnership in hosting today's call. Allow me also to acknowledge the collaboration of the United Nations Non-Governmental Liaison Service, who has been working with us closely throughout the preparations. We are delighted to have Ambassador Peter Thomson, who is the United Nations Secretary General's Special Envoy on Oceans, to join today as a keynote speaker. The webinar today will feature a session where we will hear from private sector leaders on a set of questions related to sector mobilizations towards SDG 14 implementation. Another session will include interventions from a series of private sector representatives who are joining from different parts of the world, who can share with us their ideas and recommendations on how we can keep the momentum for ocean action and Ocean Conference going. The recording of today's session and a summary, which we will be prepared, will be made available online to all. We are very much looking forward to all your innovative ideas and recommendations, and wish you a very successful webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tatinen, for your remarks. And now I would like to welcome Ambassador Lazarus Amayo, Permanent Representative of Kenya to the United Nations, to take the floor, please.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, Professor Tijani, the President of the General Assembly, Your Excellency, Ambassador Francisco, the PR of Portugal, Ambassador Peter Thomson, UN Special Envoy for the Ocean, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. May I begin by expressing our deep condolences to His Excellency, the PGA, Professor Tijani, who is here with us, but perhaps many of you might not know that Professor Tijani lost his dear mother yesterday, and it takes a lot of courage for someone like him in such a situation to show commitment of even still coming to join us this morning in promoting matters to do with our ocean. Professor, we wish you God's comfort and strength during this trying moment for losing a mother who was a great inspiration to many and who offered great service to the community, to the country, Nigeria, and humanity. Thank you very much. Good morning, and once again, colleagues, and we welcome you all. And I would like to begin by thanking UNDESA and UN Global Compact for making it possible for us to have this session. We are grateful for the time, the effort, and resources you have put in place as we strive to continue keeping the much needed impetus required for the oceans. As I mentioned in the past webinar, that despite the postponement of the Ocean Conference, which Portugal and Kenya were scheduled to host and co-host in June, the vast amount of issues that face the oceans are still an existential reality. I would like to reassure you all that as co-hosts, we'll continue to keep mobilization efforts for the conference very high on the agenda. Excellencies, the private sector are a crucial piece of the efforts, actions, and policies towards the sustainable use of our oceans and seas, especially because the oceans continue to play an important economic role in the world economy, estimated to be between $3 and $6 trillion. To illustrate this, 90% of the global trade moves through the marine transport. Even fisheries and aquaculture supply 4.3 billion people with more than 15% of annual consumption of the animal protein. Not forgetting, of course, that 30% of the global oil and gas produced is extracted offshore. And finally, coastal tourism is the largest market segment in the world economy, comprising 5% of the global gross domestic product and 6 to 7% of the global employment. That is why, as co-hosts, we cannot overstate the importance of the private sector involvement and segment and engagement in the conversations on oceans and seas today is important. It is for this reason that we saw great significance in incorporating a sustainable blue economy investment forum during the conference, which will include the presence of CEOs, UN leaders, and other key stakeholders, and will accord an opportunity for innovators, investors, scientists, and government representatives and the like to forge meaningful partnerships. In conclusion, let me say that though governments are expected to be the source or the means of implementation, especially financing, governments alone, especially for developing countries, are not able to make and to be effective in mobilizing the adequate financial resources to exploit the oceans. This calls for partnerships between governments and other relevant players in the mobilization of the means of implementation. Business and the private sector therefore play a crucial role in complementing governments in the mobilization of resources, supporting research for building capacity, and also for forging public-private partnerships in big projects that require huge capital outlay. I thank you for your attention, and we look forward to mobilization of all efforts to conserve, to preserve, and to make healthy our oceans. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Amayo, for your remarks, and I'm sure that everybody on the line here shares your condolences to His Excellency. Now, I would like to welcome Ambassador Duarte Lopes, Permanent Representative of Portugal to the United Nations. Please, Ambassador Lopes.
Thank you very much, dear Sturla. And first of all, I would like to thank the colleagues from UNDESA and UN Global Compact for organizing this webinar, and commend all those present today for joining the global efforts in keeping the momentum towards ambitious ocean action. We were very encouraged last week by the level of participation in the previous webinar devoted to use. And I'm again delighted to witness such remarkable participation today as well, including the President of the General Assembly, whom I warmly salute. Welcome, my dear brother Tijani. You know, it is especially touching for all of us, as our dear Lazarus just said, especially touching for us that you decided to reconfirm your participation today. So thank you especially for that. Actually, as you know, we have today two PGAs with us, as our very dear Special Envoy, Ambassador Peter Thomson, whose relentless leadership I especially commend, is also participating. I will start by seconding my brother Ambassador Lázaro Zamayo. While the public health concerns had made it inevitable for us to postpone the UN Ocean Conference, Portugal and Kenya's commitment to co-host the conference remains unchanged. And because this commitment remains the same, so does our goal to make the UN Ocean Conference a platform for change, and so does our need to prepare as best as possible in order to be able to deliver when we have the conditions to meet in Lisbon. This series of webinars speak to something that has been very close to Portugal and Kenya's hearts since the very beginning. Making sure that the UN Ocean Conference will be inclusive by bringing together all the relevant stakeholders. Because we are fully convinced that governments alone cannot address the challenges we are facing and cannot bring about the transformation we need. And also because we are convinced that only by forging wide-ranging partnerships can we have a real chance of implementing the SDG 14. We therefore think of the UN Ocean Conference as a platform that is there to offer a common framework within which different stakeholders can come together and work together with a common goal, making the best out of their different strengths and abilities. And here I would like to stress the crucial role of the private sector in ensuring the effectiveness, the clout of these partnerships. Without having the private sector on board, we will not be able to turn this tide. As you all are aware, the UN Ocean Conference will be focused on science and innovation and on concrete transformative solutions. And the private sector is the main driver of innovation and the engine of creative solutions. So it is very obvious why we need you to help us move forward, why we need you to ensure the scaling up we need, and why we need you to show, because it's true and you know it's true, that the ocean is a source of prosperity and well-being, that the ocean is at the forefront of a new economic model where conservation and sustainable use, resilience and productivity go hand in hand. Precisely because of this prominent role of the private sector, and besides guaranteeing that representatives of the private sector would be able to participate in the official segments of the conference, we will also organize a Sustainable Blue Economy and Investment Forum in Cascais, next to Lisbon, and back-to-back with the UN conference, together with different partners. Rest assured that we remain committed to making sure these plans will go ahead whenever the conditions are met to hold the UN Oceans Conference. And we will also maintain our full commitment to continue to work with you and to partner with you until we meet in Lisbon and beyond Lisbon. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Francisco, for those reflections and important remarks. And we look so much forward to seeing you in Portugal next year. So before handing over to our next speakers, three prominent executives from the ocean industries, I would like to offer a few introductory words on some of the current impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. The ocean, as we all know and have already heard, plays a crucial role in the global economy. Close to 90% of all international trade of goods is carried by ships. Offshore operations are essential to global energy supplies. Mariculture and capture fisheries constitute important sources of food and animal feeds. And marine genetic resources are vital for the production of a variety of life-saving medicines. Now these vitally important ocean supply chains are facing imminent threats of delays and disruptions, while epidemiological data and risk assessments show that COVID-19 measures continue to be needed. Closed borders, curtailed travel, quarantines, and other restrictions are threatening cross-border flows of food, feeds, fuel, medical supplies, raw material, products, and key workers needed to support the health and well-being of all people. A particular and urgent concern is related to the 1.2 million men and women currently serving on board the international fleet of merchant vessels, cruise ships, and offshore service vessels. Of these, already today, as we speak, more than 150,000 are weeks and months overdue for crew change because they're being denied access to shore and prevented from being repatriated. And the number is increasing by the days. These men and women are effectively barred out, locked in, and stranded at sea for a long and uncertain period of time. The resulting physical and mental fatigue is now claiming its human toll, with daily heartbreaking reports of desperate seafarers committing suicide or jumping overboard. This is not a problem that can be solved on a case-by-case basis by companies acting alone or by countries acting on their own. It requires a comprehensive, coordinated global approach. And therefore, the UN Global Compact recently launched a set of 14 recommendations calling for immediate political action at global level. An absence of swift and decisive global policy responses will cost more lives, cause more human suffering. It will impede cross-border provisions of food, medical supplies, and other critical goods. It will trigger ripple effects, which will reverberate through national economies and slow global economic growth. So, against this bleak and dire backdrop, I will now invite 3 prominent industry executives from aquaculture, offshore wind, and finance to reflect from their vantage points on the current impacts of the pandemic and on the role of the private sector to secure a healthy and productive ocean going forward. On the call today, we are so fortunate to have Mr. Alfredo Tello, Technical and Sustainability Manager of Camanchaca, a major company engaged in industrial fishing off the coast of Chile, as well as farming of Atlantic salmon, mussels, and abalone. Camanchaca exports its products to more than 50 countries. We have Mr. Jay Borkland, Senior Engineering Manager of Lloyd's Register, which is one of the world's leading providers of professional services for engineering and technology. They're working to improve safety and performance of critical infrastructures in more than 75 countries worldwide. And last but not least, I'm happy to welcome Mr. Jay Collins, Vice Chairman of Corporate and Investment Banking of the Citigroup, an American multinational investment bank and financial services corporation, and one of the largest banks in the United States. Warm welcome to all of you. The COVID-19 pandemic is impacting businesses, large and small, in every sector all around the world. And I would like to start by inviting each of you to briefly reflect on how your industry is impacted by the pandemic, and also on the role it can play for the world to recover better. How can we build back better in the post-pandemic world? How can we ensure that the recovery is clean, green, and just? And I would like to invite you, Alfredo, to start off, please.
For the invitation and for, oops. There, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation and for arranging this meeting. So to start off, I think definitely the past couple of months have been very challenging for us, both from the side of kind of rapidly changing markets, which has meant that we have had to adapt our production plans to adjust to changing demand in the different markets we supply to. And we have also been faced with increasingly complex operations because of the protocols that we have had to adopt to prevent the spread of COVID between our workers and the very different communities where we make business. But overall, we have a positive, outlook for the future. We believe that aquaculture is a key supplier of healthy protein, and we understand that we have a critical role to play, particularly in the coming months and years, and helping create value for a wide range of stakeholders and try to help lead the way out of the crisis. So going back to one of the questions on how we can help to better recover from this crisis, I believe that at least from the aquaculture sector I can speak of, we have a very critical role and probably speeding up the development of local supply chains. I think that is a critical area where industry in particular can make a huge contribution. So developing local supply chains for well-established industries like the salmon industry can be challenging depending on the country where you operate. But it is something that certainly could have a huge impact, on the creation of new jobs and businesses in areas which would otherwise be in quite a tough situation, given that a lot of economic activities such as tourism, and particularly tourism, has dwindled to a point, almost to extinction, currently, so that is something that industry could definitely do, I think, aggressively, maybe through private and public sector collaborations, which would help us bring those small suppliers up to a standard where they can engage, in the global supply chains that at least the salmon farming industry plays in. That's one thing. And on the other hand, and with this, I'd like to kind of finish my initial reflection is aquaculture in general, and I was mentioned in the introduction, is the fastest growing food sector in the world. It is a key supplier of healthy and sustainable protein, so there is a huge potential to create new jobs and businesses across many countries, However, to do that, and to do that swiftly enough for aquaculture to help soften the crisis, if you like, we need to work hard on getting a social and political license. There are many countries where aquaculture is not being able to develop to its full potential because there are sometimes validly, sometimes not validly enough arguments, against it. And that is a huge leadership challenge for industry and the government. They need to be able to come up with the relevant and objective information to the public. And also the private sector must work in partnership, with other industries and with the government to highlight the potential, of aquaculture in general and across the globe to provide food and jobs and create value, for a wide range of stakeholders.
So thank you very much, Alfredo. We got two J's here, so I'd like to invite you, Jay Collins, to take the floor, please.
Great, thank you. Well, let me start off with the big picture, and then I'd like to say some words on the agenda of sustainable oceans today. But first, I'd just say, as you talk about building back better, a couple of thoughts. One is that I've been using the borrowing from Michelle Walker's book called The Gray Rhino, that the pandemic has taught us that that we stared at and looked at a pandemic that we knew was coming, that was large and inevitable, and we didn't prepare. And I would say that the environmental challenges and the social challenges of the planet, and of course of the oceans, are very similar. We're facing multiple gray rhino moments all at the same time. And as I sit in my library today, looking at Churchill's book, Triumph and Tragedy, we have that choice. We have the choice to look at this crisis, learn from it, pivot, and say, these gray rhinos that are staring us in the face are coming, and we have a choice to prepare and to build back better. Second, in order to build back better, we at Citi and our clients and partners around the world already see that there will be a new normal. We're not going back to where we were ever again. And some of the components of what we had in the past, the private-public partnership mentality and approach that the Global Investors for Sustainable Development, that the Secretary General and 30 large corporates and investors, including Citi, have been involved in, really represents a spirit of how the public and private partnerships can be formed to work together to accomplish the SDGs. And of course, oceans are in that midst. The critical element of that partnership, though, is private sector investment. And so the key is to maintain the focus of investors through this crisis. The good news is ESG funds have been outperforming in the market so far. We're seeing that ESG scores for corporates and others that haven't performed well in terms of their ESG behavior have done poorly. We've seen that investors in the ESG space have moved from negative screening to real strong additionality objectives. And we've seen, that there's been a Gen Z and millennial wake-up call through this process yet again to urge us to act. And by the way, the first beneficiary of that has been social. We've seen, we now have about 830 billion of green and sustainable bonds outstanding, about 100 billion of which has been done year to date. And the social component of that is 20 billion, which has already surpassed that of last year. But let me turn just for a second, and I'll be brief about the issues at hand today in terms of the oceans. And I had some thoughts to reiterate the call to action of why it's so critical to support the oceans, but the speakers ahead of me have already covered that at length. So I will just make two comments. One, just to say that Citi and certainly I personally feel extraordinarily, want to congratulate and endorse what the UN Compact has done in terms of the Blue Bond principles. And if you look at their Blue Bond, the Blue Bond reference of the UN Compact and the work of the UN in sustainable oceans, one of the things that's so important is, and that we love about it, is that it doesn't just tackle and take on SDG 14. You've essentially clustered concepts of an ecosystem, not just at the core of oceans, but the ecosystems that are dependent and interrelated to and around oceans. So agriculture and food, as we just heard, SDG 2, energy, climate, SDG 7, 13, all that can be done in terms of sustainable transport and renewable energy. Quite frankly, in this crisis, the Build Back Better will put SDG 8 and the future of work and jobs at the forefront of everything, and therefore ocean-driven and ocean-dependent livelihood and jobs will have to be a cornerstone. Others, whether it's clean water, smart cities, can be clustered in and around these principles. And so it really puts oceans, if you will, at the center of this enormous challenge that we have, but shows the codependency of the planet, of the social, and of the economic as we build back. And finally, I would just say that one of the things that is pointed to in the SDG bond space by the Sustainable Oceans and the GISD members, people like our institutions like PIMCO and others, have looked at this move toward outcome linkages, the importance of additionality, the importance of measurement of really having an outcome. And in order for us to move from just use of proceed bonds to a world where we link outcomes, like Enel has done so successfully, it's time to dust off those structures again, to target SDGs and specific KPIs, SASB KPIs, to take within the Sustainable Oceans principles that we now have and make sure that we have targets that are measurable, that are material to those that issue, that are within the control of management or the government that set those targets, but that we find that there is, while at times extraordinary reasons to continue down the successful ICMA path of use of proceeds, one of the doors that's been open to us now in terms of really pushing toward outcome-driven approaches will be in the bond market, and following the example and applying it to oceans, to the blue bonds or sustainable ocean principles, and the cluster of sustainability objectives in and around the ocean, to see more funding put to work, investors putting money to work, corporates striving to achieve the objectives of oceans and the principles, and certainly a policy framework that has been put around this by many of the UN officials and others at this table. So applaud your efforts, and am honored to be here with you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jay, for those very interesting comments, and also thank you again for the dedicated support that you and other large financial institutions have been contributing in developing the Blue Bond principles. We are very hopeful and high expectations for the importance of this financial instrument. Now, Jay Borkland, please.
Thank you, Sturla. And thank you to the distinguished members in attendance. We as a representative of business that has been involved with the development of the UNGC Ocean Stewardship 2030 report that will be presented at the Ocean Conference, are very pleased to be here to share some thoughts today. And first of all, let me say that we in the industry share the world's concern during this really challenging time. Our thoughts are with the world community as it works through this public health crisis. Taking a term from the resiliency industry, we have an opportunity to rebuild by design. We can rebuild the global economy and the global health system in a manner that is more resilient and more beneficial in the long term. Offshore renewable energy, and in particular, offshore wind, has the potential to play a significant role in this recovery. And at the same time, also continue to play a significant role in safeguarding the oceans and in providing the climate to meet the SDGs. You see, offshore wind is a new energy technology, and it alone has the potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by as much as 18% by 2030. Through technical innovation, the cost of offshore wind has come down dramatically over recent years, and it's now a financially desirable energy source, commensurate with other forms of energy. So it's being adapted widely. For instance, in the US, over a dozen large projects are in process or about to start. It is moving at really a rapid pace. the build out of large-scale offshore wind is essentially the build out of large-scale infrastructure projects. And these types of projects rapidly create thousands of skilled jobs and will help the economy recover. So ORE industry has a special role to play in the recovery here. What the private sector ambitions for the UNGC is to make the global community aware that governments and industry need to work together. That there is a need for the advancement of the technology and adaptation of offshore wind and other ocean renewable energy in order to help balance the climate. And in doing so, this will also assist in assisting in the repair of the damage that's been done by this health emergency. So we would like to see the governments and industry work together to create policy that allows for strong financial and low risk adaptation of ocean renewable energy, such that industry will then invest and accelerate the development of this technology. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jay, and thank you also for your very valuable and appreciated contributions as a member of the editorial board of the Global Compact Ocean Stewardship Report 2030, which will be published by the end of next week. It's an excellent report, and I can recommend it to everybody. Now, as you can all see, we are running a few minutes behind schedule, but I would still ask your brief reflections on your expectations and ambitions for the UN Ocean Conference next year. How do you envision the role of business in order to support a successful conference and to drive commitments and ambitions? So I'll turn to you, Jay, for a brief, Jay Collins, for a brief comment on that first.
Sure. Thank you. So first, I would say that the public sector can't do this without the private sector. We will not achieve our goals unless we have a partnership mentality, concrete approaches to partnership, and private sector investors committed to this process. And therefore, anchoring and as we move forward and conduct the conference, the participation of the leaders in the private sector will be critical. Second, obviously, not just their presence, but to really look toward what the outcomes are that they're looking to achieve, and the commitments that have been made that are oftentimes very soft in and around where we're going. We believe that the market will increasingly drive for outcome commitments that are transparent, verifiable, and against which financing will be done, against which risk will be measured. And so having discussions about the financing world that supports the private sector ambitions, the investors that support the private sector's ambitions to make a difference in the oceans will be critical. And like I said, I think we now have, thanks to the work of the Compact and the principles, we now have, at least as one part of the equation, a framework around which we can build that momentum. And finally, it was, as was said by Jay before me, the technological component of this is tremendous. We have had, because of COVID-19, so much setback in terms of where we were when we launched the SDGs and Addis Ababa. In order to recover and build back better, we're going to have to invest in technologies. We're going to have to invest in technologies with scale, with speed, with replicability, that come out of pilots and small projects into global efforts and initiatives. And so I would just urge you, as you plan the conference going forward, to look at the technologies and the private sector and public sector's role in being able to put funding at scale and speed behind those. And I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jay. Any brief comments from you, Alfredo? You should unmute your.
There it is.
Yeah.
Well, I agree with Jay's comments. I would only highlight that. I mean, I think it is definitely clear to all of us involved around the ocean that there is a huge potential for the ocean to make a very significant contribution to the world economy and alleviate some of the most pressing challenges that we face in terms of sustainability. But so to do it right, you know, basically in line with the Sustainable Development Goals and overall sustainably, I believe that we need a broad consensus among many stakeholders, you know, from the private sector, from government, and from different institutions. And I believe that could be one of the key roles of the conference, is how do we reach this broad consensus regarding that there are multiple uses to the ocean. There is a huge potential, but we will only be able to develop it, you know, if we agree, you know, on general terms of how to do it, you know. And I think working towards that consensus, which is definitely not easy, it requires enormous leadership from the private sector, from the public sector as well. But that is, I would believe, the ultimate, at least in my point of view, objective of the conference. You know, is that we can all agree on the pathway, and the COVID crisis probably provides a stage where we can probably accelerate many of the things that otherwise would have taken a longer time, given the pressing, you know, economic and sustainability challenges that we have. Maybe we can do it faster, you know, and better and faster, you know. That's what I would aim towards.
Thank you, Alfredo. Jay Borkland, any additional brief comments?
Sure, yes, thank you. As Jay Collins mentioned a few minutes ago, the private sector, the public sector can't do it without the private sector. And what is also true is that the private sector cannot advance without the public sector. And so it's a true partnership. And we hope that what happens at the conference shines a light on the need, the specific need for this partnership, in particular in industries such as ocean renewable energy and aquaculture, where government and industry needs to work together. There are concerns over shared ocean space and use, and only through policy, working with industry, can these challenges be overcome and really allow us to unlock the potential of the future of these new industries to help improve the health of the oceans and the health of the climate in general. And as an example to some governments that are moving ahead, there are several governments, such as in Europe and in Brazil, where renewable energy policy is a central component of the national energy policy now. And that is allowing the development of renewable energy to increase and help reduce the climate, the GHG issues that exist into the future, and will help us meet the SDGs.
So thank you so much, Jay. Thank you, all three of you, for these very interesting, inspiring, and very important reflections. And now it's my privilege and true pleasure to invite His Excellency Peter Thomson, UN Secretary General Special Envoy for the Ocean, to give a keynote speech. Please, Peter.
Thank you very much, Sturla, and apologies for joining late. I was part of a high-level group in the UN system. The Deputy Secretary General held us in for talking about sort of subjects that you guys were just talking about when I joined you, and the way that everything has to be interconnected in this common struggle that we have. Our meeting was specifically about the build-up to the UNFCCC COP in Glasgow, which of course will be late next year now. Things have been postponed because of the pandemic. Let me say a few things before coming to what I heard you gentlemen just discussing there on the panel. Firstly, while it is true that these postponements have all taken place, and it's not just the UN Ocean Conference and the climate COP in Glasgow, it's the whole raft of these multilateral meetings have all been postponed. But I want to assure you, and obviously I speak from the UN Ocean Conference platform, that that's all it is. They're just postponements. They will be held. The multilateral process is very much in train. Momentum is what we're working on now, and we're getting excellent reactions from everybody. The momentum is continuing towards these big multilateral conferences. So I'm looking forward to seeing you all in Lisbon. So I would just emphasize that word momentum at the moment. Just keep doing what you're doing in favor of, in our case, SDG 14 and ocean action, because it's all going to be coming up for further assessment and development and sharing when we get to Lisbon next year. Look, in practical terms, this really is the time when our voices should be heard about the transition, the blue-green transition. This is obviously a difficult time for governments to decide on directions. There is a low road, which is the easy one to take, especially with the low fuel costs at the moment, the low fossil fuel costs. But we have to be so careful that we don't just go back to the beginning of the tunnel, which we have been traveling through these last 3 months. And that is where we will be heading if we go back to the old gray economy of subsidized fossil fuels and all the rest that contributed to the mess that humanity had got into. And it is a mess because we have a hiatus now, but we were heading towards a 3.5 degree world by the end of the 21st century. And things like coral disappear at 2 degrees, you know, so it was a mess. Anyway, this pandemic, the one silver lining that we could say that it has is that it gives us a chance to rethink. And so those of us that are in a position to do so must be very clear in our message at the moment that that's the high road to recovery that we must take. And that high road takes us on the blue-green track. It's obviously a steeper road to travel, but it's one that takes us to a good place for our children and grandchildren. And that's the one we're going to take. And you'll see that a lot of governments, thinking of places like the EU, know that, and they're pushing that themselves. So please add your voices to that from the private sector. I mentioned fossil fuel subsidies there. You know, I'm not talking on my own there, because on Earth Day recently, the Secretary General of the United Nations laid down 6 principles. And included in those 6 principles were the ending of fossil fuel subsidies. He also called for polluters to be made to pay for their pollution. And he called for public funds that are available to be invested into a future of sustainable projects that help the environment and nature. So this is very much the push that we're looking for from the United Nations. And, you know, it's not a quixotic enterprise, this. You know, you can already see the countries who are going to be the winners in the future, who are investing wisely now. I noticed the other day, Chile put in their NDC for the Glasgow COP, their nationally determined contribution. And in there, they state that their aim is to be a global power in the production of green hydrogen. And they've got the Atacama Desert, so they've got plenty of solar power to do that. Why would they want to be a world power in green hydrogen? It's because the future, and I'm talking as early as 2030, I saw yesterday that Norway said they will order no new ships from 2030 onwards, which are not 100% renewable energy powered. So how are they going to do that? Electricity and green hydrogen, presumably. So we are on the cusp of revolution here when it comes to the greening of shipping. And in our lifetimes, we're going to see bunker fuel go the way that it should go, which is into history, and this clean green transition taking place with these new forms of power. So that's, you know, very positive news, and this is the sort of time when those investment decisions need to be taken. It's in the self-interest of our species that we do so. Sturla, you just start going like this when I'm running out of time, okay? Because I've got no time mechanism here.
1 more minute, Peter.
Okay, good. In that case, look, again, just reflecting on the group of people that I was just with, very high-powered group in the UN system. We have to make this clean green transition, and to do so, we've got to keep our eyes on the timeline ahead of us. I know you guys are interested in the UN Ocean Conference. I was speaking to the government of Portugal yesterday. We're not yet in a position to announce those dates, but as soon as we are, we'll put them out there for everybody to know. You will have seen perhaps that The Economist, with its World Ocean Summit, has announced that they're going to have their summit in Lisbon in March. So there's one date you can start planning for. But you should also register for the virtual ocean dialogues, which are being held in the first week of June. This is to fill the gap left by the Ocean Conference. Just go to the World Economic Forum's website, put in virtual ocean dialogues, and you can register for those. And there's very important private sector discussions happening in there. But I want to assure you all, because I think my time is up here, that that there is the future of our species on this planet is the sustainable blue economy. And who's going to develop that? The private sector is. Whether it's medicine in the post-antibiotic age, whether it's sustainable aquaculture and new forms of nutrition from the sea, it's private sector that's going to develop that. Renewable energy, offshore, as you said, wind and so on, it's private sector. So those in government and those in the public sector understand that, and they want that partnership, and Lisbon will be a very important time in the forging of that partnership as far as the sustainable blue economy is concerned. So I look forward to seeing you all in Lisbon at the UN Ocean Conference next year, and I commend UN Global Compact for all the work that it's doing in that regard, and I commend DESA for organizing this webinar. Thank you for the opportunity of speaking, Sturla.
Thank you so much, Peter, for sharing your deep insights. And we are so lucky to have you, and you have an opportunity if you have additional remarks in the closing session of this webinar. So thank you so much. We will now start the interactive dialogue and invite some of you to take the floor for up to 2, and that's max 2 minutes, in order to ask questions to the panelists. And this dialogue will be moderated by our highly esteemed colleagues at the UNDESA. So please, Nayara Costa, the floor, or rather the screen, is yours.
Thank you very much, Sturla, and thanks very much for the partnership for organizing this webinar. So we are moving now to our interactive dialogue. We have a list of colleagues that have been identified to speak. As Sturla was saying, you have 2 minutes to address the questions, the key questions of this webinar. They are also showing on the screen. What I will be doing is I will be listing the 3 speakers in order, so you can raise your hands on the panel. So my colleagues will be making you the panelist, and you can unmute. You have 2 minutes, so we will be trying to accommodate as many speakers as we can. I will also invite all of you and all the speakers and also the participants, if you want to exchange or share resources or links or information, please use the chat box. Also, the speakers, whenever you mention something you want to share, please use the chat box. We will be saving the information on the chat box and also using those on our summary. So without further ado, I have three, I'll list the first three speakers. We have Echo Wave Power from Israel, followed by Initiative for Global Resilience from Thailand, and OPAGAC, speaking on behalf of tuna fishermen from Spain. So Echo Wave Power, the floor is yours. Matthias.
Hello, thank you. Harvesting the power of the waves has a lot of advantages. Wave energy is stable. In suitable locations, it can produce around the clock. 2/3 of the people live on the coastline, so we can reduce the transmission cost. In addition, wave energy can produce twice the amount of electricity that the world produces now. EcoWave Power developed an innovative technology that is mostly located on land. So we attach floaters to existing structures like piers, jetties, and breakwaters. The floaters move with the motion of the waves, creating pressure that then is transmitted into clean electricity. It's cost efficient, reliable, insurable, and environmentally friendly. We're operating in Gibraltar, the only wave power station in the world that is connected to the grid through a PPA. And last year, the company was recognized by the United Nations with the Global Climate Action Award. The development of new wave energy projects will be a perfect complement to the renewable energy mix. According to IRENA, the global technical potential for wave energy is about 500 gigawatts. This will also mean creating a new industry and thousands of new jobs. Our expectation for the conference is to get visibility and discuss with relevant stakeholders for the creation of mechanisms and legislations to develop new projects and untap this energy source. So we are looking to discuss with potential partners and location owners for the creation of wave energy stations that will assist to reach an energy transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthias. So we have then Initiative for Global Resilience, followed by OPAGAC, Tuna Fishermen, and then followed by Ocean Data Alliance. So Initiative for Global Resilience, you have the floor. Barbara? Barbara, would you like to speak? So I'll move to the next one, and then we can check if Barbara will be able to speak. OPAGAC, speaking on behalf of tuna fishermen, Julio Moron. Are you on the call? Okay, so I'll move to Ocean Data Alliance, followed by Common Seas and Planet Care. Ocean Data Alliance, Stephen Adler, are you on the call?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, over to you.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak. Yeah, I find one of the great things that we've all experienced in the last 2 months, this horrible period of COVID-19, has been the absence of humans in nature and the responsive nature to our absence. And I hope as we rebuild the global economy in the next years to come, we'll start thinking seriously about how to rebuild and protect the natural habitat that we have, because it's so essential, as Peter Thomson said, to the ocean as an economic resource. Unfortunately, animals don't have legal rights. And so we ordinarily treat the ocean biodiversity as an externality in business. But we could address that if we could provide a biodiversity offset, which means if we could ask business to step in and start investing in marine protected areas, to set aside pieces of the ocean that could better survive and allow biodiversity to thrive, especially for the industries that are most active in the ocean, like energy, cruise ships, transport, fishing, and even coastal communities that don't treat their wastewater. If we could start thinking about how to either set that aside as a large insurance program or as a covered bond, to start asking the private sector to invest in setting aside parts of the ocean where humans don't enter, we could rebuild the blue economy and protect biodiversity at the same time. We have carbon offsets, they don't work perfectly today, but we could find a way of developing biodiversity offsets to fund marine protected areas that the private sector could take a leadership position in, so that rebuilding the blue economy also builds back nature. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephen. So we will move to the next speaker. So we have Common Seas, followed by from United Kingdom, followed by Planet Care from Slovenia, and Blue Oceans Partners in France. So Common Seas, Peter Chauvel, you have the floor.
Can you hear me now? Perfect. I represent the perspective of an ex-seafood industry member, strategy consultant, and now project lead developing ways to reduce plastic escapement into oceans. I wholeheartedly believe there are efforts across regions and industries to ensure a healthy ocean future, but they thus far have been insufficient. With COVID-19...
Okay, let's hold on. Yeah. Peter, apologies,
No problem.
Peter. You can continue, sorry.
Thank you. And with COVID-19, we face an uncertain future. That being said, we will find a way to manage COVID-19, and we will see an economic recovery driven by the largest fiscal and monetary effort in history. This also presents the opportunity to permanently change behaviors. While we've been waging this inadequate campaign to save our oceans and our planet, we've seen the impact that the recent reduction in industrial activity is having on the remediation of our environment. As we return to some kind of normal, we must utilize the governmental support to create new roles and support new ideas to sustain this positive impact without jeopardizing or compromising struggling or marginalized groups. To do our part, we at Common Seas have been empowering local communities and ensuring they have adequate capacity and resources to achieve the goals they've set out. But we also acknowledge that financial recovery is only one part of this mission. Although this has been and continues to be a terribly painful experience, we cannot waste the good that has come from it. Now's the time to use your knowledge, networks, and financial capacity to carry on the environmental rehabilitation that was a serendipitous outcome of this global health crisis. If we do not act, I fear we will see the issues of the past decades exacerbated in an attempt to expedite the economic recovery. So I hope the next time I speak to you, it's with all of you and not in front of a screen, and on the positive changes that have resulted from utilizing fiscal stimulus money to invest in a green economic recovery. Thank you again for the opportunity to share the perspective of a millennial who remains hopelessly optimistic about the outlook of our food production, oceans, and future.
Thank you very much, Peter. I think we are all looking forward for face-to-face meetings. So I'll list the next three. So Planet Care from Slovenia, I don't think they are on the call, but I'm giving a last chance. Followed by Blue Oceans Partners, and then the UNSDSN and UN Major Group for Science and Technology. So I don't see Planet Care. I'll go with Blue Oceans Partners. Christian Lim, are you on the call?
Yes, I'm on the call. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent, thank you. So hi everyone, my name is Christian Lim and I'm both a freediver and an ocean investor. As an investor, I co-founded Blue Oceans Partners to invest in innovations that regenerate ocean health. We back startups that deliver both systemic impact and competitive market returns. And we focus on solutions to overfishing, ocean pollution, and climate change. And we do so because innovation is key to achieve SDG 14. For example, AI technologies can help us detect illegal fishing and make marine protected areas vastly more efficient than today. And such technologies can also be profitable and therefore attract large amounts of private capital to scale globally and in just a few years. However, we need an ecosystem to create an abundant pipeline of such innovations and scale them. This ecosystem is composed of incubators, accelerators, competitions, and venture capital investors. The good news is that in recent years, such ecosystems started emerging. It is still small, with about 20 pioneering organizations globally, maybe, but they have already backed hundreds of startups, including many success stories. For instance, They brought to market sustainable proteins to substitute fish meal and innovative retail models that enable us to reuse packaging. As a result, there is a unique opportunity today to scale this small but already proven ecosystem. We therefore invite the private sector, from family offices to corporates and institutional investors, to massively invest in it now. This is a chance for the private sector to make a critical contribution to achieving SDG 14. And with the global coalition of ecosystem participants, we are working on an initiative to facilitate investment into this ocean innovation ecosystem. So we're hoping to announce it soon, so please stay tuned. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Christian. So I think colleagues from Planet Care, we identified you. So we'll go with Planet Care, followed by UN SDSN and UN Major Group for Science and Technology, and then Global Partnerships Forum. So Planet Care, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope we're not so hidden not to see us. So Planet Care is in fact a startup. We were established in 2017, and we have just one goal: to stop microfiber pollution to the ocean, to the environment, to fresh waters. And we do this actually by developing filters for washing machines. Washing machines are the greatest producers of microfiber pollution. So we've developed several types of filters so that we can address pretty much all washing machine types, from domestic to industrial and commercial, to stop microfiber pollution. We catch the fibers. We catch 90% of the fibers. Our product is a very sustainable product in the way that actually the captured microfibers are then safely removed. We have the cartridges that we use returned to us so they can be reused. So we have a high reuse and very low production of waste, actually. In fact, there's no waste because the materials are recycled. We're addressing this in a very practical way. We firmly believe that we must have market-based initiatives to protect the ocean. But of course, as a startup, we need help, we need support. We're a midget in this world, but we have the best solution at the moment. And we're still developing to improve it further on. And we're absolutely certain that in the future, pretty much every washing machine will have a filter, and we think our filter is the best to do this job. Still, we're small. That's why we're linking with everybody we can reach, from NGOs to policymakers to individuals. We're selling our filters, so we're commercial, we're out there, and we're trying to give everybody an opportunity to stop their microfiber pollution. We are looking forward to partnerships, to promotion. We're willing to talk to everybody to move this ahead, and we're very happy, actually. Peter Thomson will remember us, we've met in Paris, that we're trying to be everywhere. We're trying to move this issue forward, and any alliances and help in that are extremely welcome. So if you have any ideas how we can fit, we are here to address this issue. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Andre. Following, we have UN, SDSN, and UN Major Group for Science and Technology. I'm not sure if they are on the call, so I'll be listing the next two. Global Partnerships Forum, followed by Marta Shaw from GLISPA, Global Island Partnership, and ESRI, Geographic Mapping. So I don't see Patrick Paul on the call. If someone from that wants to speak from the UN Major Group for Science and Technology, if you are on the call, just flag to us on the chat, we can identify you. So I'll follow up with Global Partnerships Forum. Mr. Dosal, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here, actually, and I want to congratulate the organizers as well as the co-host for putting together this important dialogue. it's quite clear that the pandemic has created a huge amount of upheaval around the world, and governments are struggling to meet the emergency needs of their people. And there's a risk that the SDGs might be left behind. And I'd like to propose something. I'm speaking also on behalf of the Ocean Sanctuary Alliance, which has undertaken studies on MPAs to identify gaps and to help governments implement some of these marine protected areas. While a lot has been achieved, there's still a major gap where governments can help the coastal communities, help the fishing communities, and also build sustainable livelihoods. All this comes down to lack of resources. As previous speakers have already mentioned, they're working on amazing initiatives. But the bottom line is, we don't have enough funds. And I think, and I know the Oceans Conference had plans to put together a kind of an investment forum, a private sector forum, and so on. I'd like to propose that the UN consider setting up like national committees led by financial institutions. Financial institutions not only have investment capital, but also philanthropic capital, because they manage funds for high net worth clients. And often these clients could benefit with some ideas and guidance on where they can channel their philanthropic dollars, investment dollars, social impact dollars. And if it's done, perhaps led by the Global Compact, it has national networks. That could actually make a difference and help address the financial lacuna and provide a platform for the UN to attract new partners and new investors. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dosal. So we are following up. I just want to double check Marta Shaw from GLISPA. If you are on the call, we have not managed to identify you, but we'll follow up with the next three. The Monterey Bay Aquarium, then followed by Caneos, and then Blue Nalu. So Monterey Bay Aquarium, you have the floor.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Great. My name's Jennifer Dianto-Kemerly. I'm the Vice President of Global Ocean Initiatives for the aquarium. Over the past few years, we enlisted a multi-stakeholder partnership approach that brings aquaculture and fishery improvement efforts toward environmental sustainability to scale. But recently, we've also found that this model is also very effective during times of great disruption. So I wanted to share it with everyone today. This partnership assurance model is bringing together the entire seafood supply chain, from producers to end buyers, and together with civil society and governments, we're actually co-designing, implementing, and verifying environmental improvements and trying to ensure that the direct benefits go back to the actual producers. This includes small-scale producers in aquaculture and fisheries. It's really important when doing this that the responsibility of sustainability is disseminated along all stakeholders of that supply chain. I'm going to give you a very specific example. In 2019, we launched the Vietnam Sustainable Shrimp Alliance to improve aquaculture of shrimp throughout the entire Cà Mau province of Vietnam. And the goal is to improve sustainability by 2030 in keeping with the SDGs. This partnership includes more than 20 companies across the seafood supply chain, the government, banks, technical advisors, and regional NGOs. In early 2020, this alliance was really working in earnest on their work plan, and then the pandemic disrupted the important work. Key partners from the private sector and government had to quickly pivot to address the issues, including health and safety of workers, supply chain logistical issues, economic impacts, very understandable. We thought for a moment the entire project would be disrupted, and we didn't understand how long that would last. But what we saw as a result, because it was such multi-stakeholder engagement, that during this time progress could be maintained. The NGO and technology partners could continue fundamental work around setting up systems, data collection, and research. Our market partners in the supply chain, despite severe disruption, remained fully committed to environmental targets given the critical role of sustainability in building more resilient food systems. What we would like to continue to see is strong government engagement, strong public and private sector commitments to strong governance overall to help us respond to and prepare for future disruptions. And this project is not just a model that we're seeing in Vietnam and farm shrimp. We're also seeing the similar model play out in India and Andhra Pradesh with respect to farm shrimp, in the Philippines, blue swimming crab fisheries, the Vinyasa Sea, and in Chile in antibiotic reduction around farm salmon. All of these models have something in common, and it's private sector engagement as well as NGO sector and government engagement.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you so much for this. So I'll go, we have two more and we are running out of time. So Caneos followed by Blue Nalu. Thank you. Caneos, are you on the call? Milind? I think you are muted. Milind? So let me move to Blue Nalu, Greg Murphy.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, Milind, we can hear you. So go ahead and followed by Greg Murphy.
Yes, thank you so much. So thank you, colleagues, and thank you, you all. So thanks for this again, the opportunity. So our ideas that we would be presenting this morning are based on the emerging science, technology, and innovation solutions that can be implemented or that needs to be implemented through the enhanced international public-private partnership governance and the financial framework. So these two topics are basically complements what has been done and suggested by Ambassador Thomson, Mr. Sturla, Henriksen, and this morning from J. Collins. Ambassador Thomson had organized the Innovation Forum back in 2017, May 17, which I was participant, and then Sturla, his work on these complex systems for international ocean governance, and then the blue bonds. So based on this, our 4 ideas that we are proposing, the first proposal is to create the new global collaborative framework for sharing of marine technology and the communication data standards, especially to monitor these oceans addressed to the least developing countries and the small island developing states. For example, as you all know, emerging sensors and space technology can allow for greater monitoring to prevent the IUU, biodiversity loss, and especially now with the COVID, offer new tracing methods. And no single country can afford to develop these diverse tools and technologies and challenges. So that's where we need these concerted efforts. So based on this, our second proposal calls for develop or to aim incentivize series of PPP-based limited objective demonstration projects across different regions to share these good practices and especially provide this new just transition jobs, which are really would be key as the momentum. The third proposal to support this, we invite our colleagues, especially what Jay was mentioning, to devise a dedicated funding facility. We call something as a Global Ocean Fund for Development, GOF4D, that can be led by UN Global Compact, which is an operational vehicle for implementing these various innovation technologies initiatives, and it could be a mechanism for these blue bonds as a force multiplier that we can use and leverage this existing mechanism. And finally, our first and the last proposal, that most important one that we challenge to everyone here, is in collaboration with several indigenous populations around the world, for example, as a FILAC. We would like to see address some of the pressing needs of the indigenous populations to improve their ocean-based economy and poverty reduction.
Thank you,
Melinda. Just to conclude is to use some of the scalable projects and so we would share these 4 proposals and look forward.
Thank you so much, Milind. So we'll move to our last speaker, Blue Nalu. Greg Murphy, you have the floor. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you to the organizers. I was actually able to participate in the Ocean Conference that Ambassador Thomson organized in 2017. So it's great to see that this momentum for ocean action continues. So our company, Blue Nalu, is focused on developing a new type of industry that we call cellular aquaculture, and we produce cell-based seafood. So with this technology, we can actually produce large volumes of real seafood products from just the cells of a wide array of fish species without genetic modification in large factories that will be located around the world. So cell-based seafood products have no bones, no heads, no tails, no scales, and they are 100% yield, 100% usable. Our products also will not contain mercury, microplastics, or other environmental contaminants, and will help to promote a responsible and ethical seafood supply chain. We're focused on partnering with the seafood industry in order to offer consumers a third option that complements wild capture and farm-raised seafood, creates jobs, and support growing demand for delicious and healthy, sustainable seafood globally. To date, we have attracted close to 40 investors through a seed and Series A round of funding from 11 nations, including nations from Asia, Europe, Middle East, and North America, and South America, including 5 strategic investors who are committed to partnering with us to promote this industry. One investor I'll highlight briefly is Duarte, based out of the Netherlands. And they're a leader in providing feed for the aquaculture industry. It will be our partner on supply chain. We're also pleased to partner with Griffith Foods from Chicago, Rich Products here in the US, Polwan from Korea, and Sumitomo from Japan. So we're committed to the global goals and appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Greg, for that. And Sturla, over to you to close the call and yeah, follow up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nayara, for facilitating the dialogue, and thanks to the speakers for your very interesting and informative interventions. Before returning to Peter for closing remarks, let me just tell you that together with Lloyd's Register Foundation, the UN Global Compact has looked into the very interesting opportunities posed by seaweed to produce sustainable food, feed, fuel, medicines, and also to capture for CCS. So on the 4th of June, what we call the Seaweed Day, we will be launching a seaweed manifesto to address this. So that points also to the future, and Peter, please, for your closing remarks and comments.
Thanks very much, Sturla, and thanks for finishing on that seaweed note, because I was so great to hear Greg speaking again. And Greg, please get in touch with me, because I need further details for something that we've got coming up on nutrition from the ocean. So you can get those my contact details from DESA, the organizers of this. But seaweed, algae, non-fin fish, there's enough out there in the ocean to feed humanity forever. We just have to be a little bit more creative, a bit more innovative, and the ocean is going to look after us as long as we respect its health. So Greg, thanks very much for your words. I also want to thank Melinda for 4 great proposals there. Melinda, you've told me about them before, but I really want to assure you that sharing of marine technology is at the core of SDG 14. I mean, it's one of the targets, and it's an essential part of the UN Decade of Ocean Science. It's one of the foundation pillars of that. And as you know, the UN Decade gets underway next year. So keep pushing on that, but be assured it is part of the international agreement. I was also really heartened to hear Jennifer speaking about how things are going in Vietnam. You know, one of the countries that's dealt with the COVID pandemic so successfully, and I wasn't surprised to hear that, you know, they're carrying on with the sustainability in the shrimp industry that you guys have got going in partnership there. Now, people have got to keep eating, and we just have to make sure that the developments that are happening in the nutrition industry are ones that are compatible with this blue-green recovery road that I keep talking about. I was watching something today on the changes that are going to happen in the civil aviation industry, and I was horrified to see that all foods are going to be wrapped in cling wrap plastic, according to this person anyway. You know, this is what we've been fighting against, and we must not go back down that track of covering everything in plastic. And, you know, it could be one of those short-term measures which governments and corporations bring in because it's cheap and because obviously it's healthy to do that. But it's the wrong way to go, because where's that cling wrap plastic going to end up? It's going to end up as microfibers along the lines of what Andre was telling us about. And Andre, that allows me to segue to what you were saying about the fact that every washing machine should have a filter in it to filter out microfibers. Because we know that those microfibers have completely permeated life in the ocean now, and that we are eating those microfibers as a result. Prior to this pandemic, I was about to engage with the Director General of WHO on what is the effect on humanity of all this microfiber plastic that we are ingesting through our food chain. So full marks to you as well, Andre, for keeping on, pushing on that. You heard what the Secretary General said in his 6 principles the other day, one of which was that polluter pays. And if you put that onto the washing machine industry of the world and said, you guys are polluting nature with your microfiber plastics coming out of the washing machines, here's your chance to do a little bit of damage control before the lawsuits start and start installing filters. I think you might start getting some good reactions from that industry. And finally, Belinda Rai, you sent in a comment about youth. You know, they're going to have a role as well as the private sector in all this stuff that we've got coming up. I can assure you that in the last couple of weeks I've been engaging. In fact, DESA organized a webinar last week with youth organizations, and I've been following up with them since. One of the interesting things that came out of it is webinar burnout, that we're all locked into these webinars. And the youth have actually got some quite good ideas about other alternatives on that. We're building on those. But I want to assure Belinda that both in the virtual ocean dialogues and in the UN Ocean Conference itself, that the role of youth is a high priority for us. Why is that? It's because, you know, we're looking for innovation in all these things, and so much innovation comes out of young people. They're the people that are at college or approaching college or just graduated from college. So the voice of the youth is absolutely critical in all this. In the UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon, we had planned for a weekend prior to the UN Ocean Conference that was going to be like a youth festival with all sorts of youth forums and so on, that was going to segue into the UN Ocean Conference itself. I'm sure that when we get to the conference next year, there'll be similar arrangements to that. But please do go and register for the Virtual Ocean Dialogues. They're coming up in 2 weeks' time, and make your voice be heard there. So to all of you, look, I want to assure you that the private sector is integral to all of this. I thank UN Global Compact for the work that it does in marshalling that, but you also have your own contacts, whether you're from fisheries or whether you're from shipping or whether you're from biomedicine or whatever, and just feel connected with the sustainable blue economy movement through all those avenues that you have. I want to assure you that the UN is 100% behind the movement of the sustainable blue economy, its principles and its practical application, because we do believe that that is the future for our kind on this planet. And I thank you all for taking part in this webinar, and I thank DESA and UN Global Compact again for convening us all together. And I apologize, as I say, for my late arrival, but it's been great. I've really enjoyed listening to you. Thank you.